Dramatic monologue, a poem written in the form of a speech of an individual character. It compresses into a single view. Welcome to Easy English Learning YouTube channel, dear viewers. Today we learn some important literature items or some important literary terms. Dear viewers, আজকে আমরা কিছু গুরুত্বপূর্ণ লিটারারি টার্মস নিয়ে আলোচনা করব। ফার্স্ট অফ অল, এই প্রশ্নগুলো খুবই ইম্পর্টেন্ট, স্পেশালি যারা ইংলিশের স্টুডেন্ট, এবং সবচেয়ে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ এই শিক্ষক নিবন্ধন পরীক্ষার রিটেন পরীক্ষা শুরু হবে এবং যারা ইংলিশে জ্ঞান পিপাসু তাদের জন্য খুবই গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। এপিক, a long narrative poem in elevated style recounting the deeds of a legendary or historical hero. Epic, a long narrative poem recounting heroic deeds, although the term has also been loosely used to describe novels, such as Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, and motion pictures, such as Sergei Eisenstein's Ivan the Terrible. In literary uses, the term encompasses both oral and written compositions. The prime examples of the oral epic are Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Outstanding examples of the written epic include Virgil's Aeneid and Lucan's Pharsalia in Latin, Samson the Roland in medieval France, Ludovico Aristos, Orlando Furioso, and Torquato Tasso's Jerusalem Liberator in Italian, Cantor the Mucid in Spanish, and John Milton's Paradise Lost and Edmund Spenser's Fairy Queen in English. There are also seriocomic epics such as the Morganti, a 15th century Italian poet, Luigi Pulci, and the pseudo-Homeric Battle of the Frogs and Mice. General characteristics. An epic may deal with such various subjects as myths, heroic legends, histories, edifying religious tales, animal stories, or philosophical or moral theories. Epic poetry has been and continues to be used by people all over the world to transmit their traditions from one generation to another. Without the aid of writing, these traditions frequently consist of legendary narratives about the glorious deeds of their national heroes. Thus, scholars have often identified epic with a certain kind of heroic oral poetry, which comes into existence in so-called heroes' ages. A simple definition of drama. Drama is a literary genre. It is used in plays and other performances. It portrays the human experiences through performance and uses audience emotions. Definition of drama. Drama is a mood of fictional representation through dialogue and performance. It is one of the literary genres which is an imitation of some action. Drama is also a type of a play written for theater, television, radio, and film. In simple words, a drama is a composition in verse or prose representing a story in pantomime or dialogue. It contains conflict of characters, particularly the ones who perform in front of audience on the stage. The person who writes drama for stage directions is known as a dramatist or playwright. Types of drama. Let us consider a few popular types of drama. Comedy. Comedies are lighter in tone than ordinary works and provide a happy conclusion. The intention of dramatists in comedies is to make their audience laugh. Hence, they use coined circumstances, usual characters, and witty remarks. Tragedy. Tragic dramas use darker themes such as disaster, pain, and death, protagonists often have a tragic follow, a characteristic that leads them to their downfall. Farce. Generally, a farce is a nonsensical genre of drama which often overcast or engages slapstick humor. Melodrama. Melodrama is an exaggerated drama which is sensational and appeals directly to the senses of the audience. Just like the farce, the characters are of a single dimension and simple or maybe stereotyped. Musical drama. In musical dramas, dramatists not only tell their stories through acting and dialogue, but through dance as well as music. Often the story may be comedic, though it may also involve serious subjects. Novel, an invented prose narrative of considerable length and a certain complexity that deals imaginatively with human experience, usually through a connected sequence of events involving a group of persons in a specific setting. Within its broad framework, the genre of the novel has encompassed an extensive range of types and styles. Picaresque, epistolary, gothic, romantic, realist, historical, to name only some of the more important ones. A novel is an extended work of narrative fiction, usually written in prose and published as a book. The English word to describe such a work derives from the Italian novella for new, news, or short story of something new, itself from the Latin novella, a singular noun use of the neuter plural of novellas, diminutive of novus, meaning new. According to Margaret Doty, the novel has a continuous and comprehensive history of about 2000 years, with its origin in ancient Greek and Roman novel, medieval chivalric romance, and in the tradition of the Italian Renaissance novella. The ancient romance from was revived by Romanticism in the historical romances of Walter Scott and the novel. Some novelists, including Nathaniel Hawthorne, Harman, Melville, and Radcliffe, and John Cooper Hoyes, preferred the term romance. M.A.'s Abrams and Walter Scott have argued that a novel is a fiction narrative that displays a realistic depiction of the state of a society, while the romance encompasses any fictitious narrative that emphasizes marvelous or uncommon incidents. Works of fiction that include marvelous or uncommon incidents are also novels, including Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, G.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Such romances should not be confused with the genre fiction romance novel, which focuses on romantic love. Tragedy from the Greek is a genre of drama based on human suffering and mainly the terrible or sorrowful events that befall a main character. Traditionally, the intention of tragedy is to invoke an accompanying catharsis or a pain that awakens pleasure for the audience. While many cultures have developed forms that provoke this paradoxical response, the term tragedy often refers to a specific tradition of drama that has played a unique and important role historically in the self definition of Western civilization. The tradition has been multiple and discontinuous, yet the term has often been used to invoke a powerful effect of cultural identity and historical continuity. The Greeks and the Elizabethans in on cultural form, Hellenes and Christians in a common activity. As Raymond Williams puts it, tragedy is a genre of drama based on human suffering and mainly the terrible or sorrowful events that befall a main character. Comedy. Comedy is a genre of fiction that consists of discourses or works intended to be humorous or amusing by inducing laughter, especially in theater, film, stand-up comedy, television, radio, books, or any other entertainment medium. The term originated in ancient Greece. In Athenian democracy, the public opinion of voters was influenced by political satire performed by comic poets in theaters. The theatrical genre of Greek comedy can be described as a dramatic performance pitting two groups, ages, genders, or societies against each other in an amusing agony or conflict. Tragicomedy is a literary genre that blends aspects of both tragic and comic forms, most often seen in dramatic literature and term can in dramatic literature, most often seen in dramatic literature, the term can describe either a tragic play which contains enough comic elements to lighten the overall mood or a serious play with a happy ending. Tragicomedy, as its name implies, invokes the intended response of both the tragedy and the comedy in the audience, the former being a genre based on human suffering that invokes an accompanying catharsis, and the latter being a genre intended to be humorous or amusing by inducing laughter. A short story is a piece of prose fiction. It can typically be read in a single sitting and focuses on a self-contained incident or series of linked incidents with the intent of evoking a single effect or mood. The short story is one of the oldest types of literature and has existed in the form of legends, mythic tales, folk tales, fairy tales, tall tales, fables, and anecdotes in various incident communities around the world. The modern short story developed in the early 19th century. The short story in a crafted form in its own right. Short stories make use of plot, response, and other dynamic components as in a novel, but typically to a lesser degree. While the short story is largely distinct from the novel or novella, short novel, authors generally draw from a common pool of literary techniques. The short story is sometimes referred to as a genre. Romance is the relationship between two lovers. Is there a romance blossoming between you and your lab partner, or is the assignment so hard you have to work together constantly blossoming? Romance comes from Roman and first meant a story translated into French from Latin, the common language of Old Rome, usually about the amorous adventures of chivalrous knights, which is how romances came to be associated with love stories. Now it's used to mean a love relationship in a story or not. The Romance languages are those derived from Latin. If you romance a tale, you exaggerated it, and if you romance a person, you are making advances. In the strictest academic terms, a romance is a narrative genre in literature that involves a mysterious, adventurous, or spiritual storyline where the focus is on a quest that involves bravery and strong values, not always a love interest. However, modern definitions of romance also include stories that have a relationship issue as the main focus. In the academic sense, an example of a romance is a story in which the main character is a hero who must conquer various challenges as part of a quest. Each challenge could be its own story and can be taken out of the overall story without harming the plot. Definition of allegory. An allegory is a work in which characters, places, and actions represent broader ideas or concepts. Allegories often make use of other literary devices like personification, symbolism, and extended metaphor or more effectively make a point. The history. The term allegory was first popularized in the 14th century. It comes from the French allegory, meaning hidden meaning. The French allegory came from the Greek allegoria, which translates literally to other speaking. While it was first used broadly, its definition, at least in academic fields, was narrowed down slightly in order to cut down on word overlap and thus confusion. Allegories' meaning changed from the use of symbols in a work to convey a hidden meaning to a work which uses symbols to convey a hidden meaning, a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Ode. An ode is a type of lyric poetry with its origins in ancient Greece. Odes are elaborately structured poems praising or glorifying an event or individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. A classic ode is structured in three major parts: the strophe, the antistrophe, and the epode. Different forms such as the homostrophic ode and the irregular ode also enter a poem expressing the writer's thoughts and feelings about a particular person or subject, usually written to the person or subject or to something. Ballad. A ballad is a form of verse, often a narrative set to music. Ballads derived from the medieval French chanson ballade or ballade, which were originally dance songs. Ballads were particularly characteristics of the popular poetry and song of Britain and Ireland from the late Middle Ages until the 19th century. They were widely used across Europe and later in Australia, North Africa, North America, and South America. While ballads have no prescribed structure and may vary in their number of lines and stanzas, many ballads employ quatrains with A, B, C, D, B, or A, B, A, B rhymes schemes. The key being a rhymed second and fourth line. Contrary to a popular conception, it is rare, if not unheard of, for a ballad to contain exactly 13 lines. Additionally, couplets rarely appear in ballads, a poem or song narrating a story in short stanzas. Traditional ballads are typically of unknown authorship, having been passed on orally from one generation to the next. A traditional Irish folk ballad. Lyric. Originally a composition meant for musical accompaniment. The term refers to a short poem in which the poet's persona, or another speaker expresses personal feelings. See Robert Herrick's To Anthea, who may command him anything. John Kellery's I Hate My Love, Lucy Bogan's Song for the Last Act, a short poem that expresses the personal thoughts and feelings of the person who wrote it. Pastoral poetry is a genre of poetry that explores the connections between human life and nature. Pastoral poems usually romanticize the life of shepherds in rural environments and are presented as being free from the corruption and complexity of city life. Pastoral poetry examples: Being one of the oldest genres of poetry, pastoral poetry has multiple examples that we must understand in order to appreciate how the genre developed and changed over the centuries. Dramatic monologue. A poem written in the form of a speech of an individual character, it compresses into a single vivid scene a narrative sense of the speaker's history and psychological insight into his character. Dramatic monologue is a type of poetry written in the form of a speech of an individual character. M.S. Abrams notes the following three features of the dramatic monologue as it applies to poetry. The single person who is patiently, not the poet, utters the speech that makes up the whole of the poem in a specific situation at a critical moment. Number two, this person addresses the interacts with one or more other people, but we know of the auditor's presence and what they say and do only from clues in the discourse of the single speaker. Number three, the main principle controlling the poet's choice and formulation of what the lyric speaker says is to reveal to the reader in a way that enhances its interest, the speaker's temperament and character. Number four, types of dramatic monologue. One of the most important influences on the development of the dramatic monologue is the romantic poetry. However, the long personal lyrics typical of the romantic period are not dramatic monologues in the scene that they do not, for the most part, imply a concentrated narrative. Poems such as William Wordsworth's Tintin Abbey and Percy Shelley's Maud Blanc, to name two famous examples, offered a model of close psychological observation and psychological or pseudo philosophical inquiry described in a specific setting. The conversation poem of Samuel Taylor Coleridge are perhaps a better precedent. The genre, the genre was also developed by Felicia Hemans and Letitia Elizabeth London, beginning in the latter's case with her long poem, The Improvisatrice. Elegy. An elegy is a poem of serious reflection and in English literature, usually a lament for the dead. However, according to the Oxford Handbook of the Elegy, for all of its pervasiveness, the elegy remains remarkably ill defined, sometimes used as a catch-all to denominate text of a somber or pessimistic tone, sometimes as a marker for textual monumentalizing, and sometimes strictly as a sign of a lament for the dead. Elegy is a form of poetry natural to the reflective mind. It may treat of any subject, but it must treat of no subject for itself, but always and exclusively with reference to the poet, as he will feel regret for the past or desire for the future. So, sorrow and love became the principal themes of the elegy. Elegy presents everything as lost and gone or absent and future. A famous example of elegy is Thomas Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard. Country churchyard, 1750. Sonnet. Traditionally, the sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter employing one of the several rhyme schemes and adhering to a tightly structured thematic organization. The name is taken from the Italian sonetto, which means a little sound or song. Discover more poetic terms. Types of sonnets. A sonnet is a poetic form that originated in a poetry composed at the court of the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. The Sicilian city of Palermo, the 13th century poet and notary Giacomo the Lentini is credited with the sonnet's invention, and the Sicilian school of poets who surrounded him then spread the form to the mainland. The earliest sonnets, however, no longer survive in the original Sicilian language, but only after being translated into Tuscan dialect. The term sonnet is derived from the Italian word sonetto, little song, derived from the Latin word sonus, lit, sound, light. By the 13th century, it signified a poem of 14 lines that followed a stick rhyme scheme and structure. Mock epic. In the film genre, you may have heard of the concept of a parody. These are movies that mimic the characters, plotliness, and style of well known films or genres in a way that is overly exaggerated and humorous to mock the original creation. Did you know that parodies even exist in poetry? They are known as mock epic poems. Satire. Satire is a genre of the visual, literary, and performing arts, usually in the form of fiction and less frequently non-fiction, in which vices, follies, abuses, and shortcomings are held up to ridicule, often with the intent of exposing or shaming the perceived flaws of individuals. Corporations, government, or society itself into improvement. Although satire is usually meant to be humorous, its greater purpose is often constructive social critis- criticism, social criticism, using wit to draw attention to both particular and wider issues in society. The theory units drama, Aristotelian rules. The classical unities or three unities in drama are the classical unities or three unities in drama are the unity of action. A play should have one main action that it follows with no or few subplots. The unity of place. A play should cover a single physical space and should not attempt to compress geography, nor should the stage represent more than on place. The unity of time, the action in a play should take place over no more than 24 hours. The unity of time, the unity of time limits the supposed action to the duration roughly of a single day. Unity of place limits it to one general locality, and the unity of action limits it to a single set of incidents, which are related as cause and effect, having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Concerning the unity of time, Aristotle noted that all the plays since Aeschylus except two did illustrate such unity, but he did not lay down such a precept as obligatory. The unity of palace, perhaps tacitly he assumed that the observance of the unity of palace would be the practice of good playwrights. Since the chorus was present during the whole performance, and it would indeed be awkward always to devise an excuse for moving 15 persons about from place to place. The unity of action, the third unity, that of action, is bound up with the nurture not only of Greek but all drama. Examples of the classical plays: Sophocles, Oedipus the King, Antigone, Miracle, and Morality Palace. Miracle Palace. Miracle Plays, a captivating genre of medieval drama, transport audiences to an enchanting realm of religious stories and supernatural occurrences. From inspiring acts of faith to captivating portraits of saints and biblical figures. These plays invite us to witness the extraordinary and reaffirm our belief in the miraculous. Miracle plays, miracle plays developed during the Middle Ages and chronicled the lives, events, and martyrdom of various Catholic saints. Miracle plays included both factual and fictitious material but were primarily concerned with the religious teachings. The morality plays were a set ahead in this plays: life, death, repentance, goodness, love, justice, mercy, love, justice, mercy, gluttony, and vice were the main characters. Being allegorical, they were very interesting and featuring broad particle elements. They gave free scope to the imagination for new plots. The morality plays still contained the character of the devil of the miracle plays, and the role of vice was to torment the virtue by mischievous pranks. His chief duty was to tease the devil by beating him with a bladder or a wooden shot at every opportunity. The morality palace generally ended with the triumph of virtue, and the devil was driven to the hell mouth, vice on his back. Every man is the best known morality pele, and this has been revived recently in England and America, like the miracle plays. Most of the old moralities are of unknown dates and origin. The unknown authors are John Skelton, who wrote Magnificence, and the Necromancer. Another author is Sir David Lindsay, 1490 to 1555, whose purpose was to make the rulers uncomfortable by telling them unpleasant truths in verse. The satire enters into English drama and is used as an instrument of correcting abuses. Besides Everyman, other well-known moralities are Pride of Life, Hack's Corner, Castle of Perseverance. Fable. Fable is a literary genre defined as a succinct fictional story in prose or verse that features animals, legendary creatures, plants, inanimate objects, or forces of nature that are anthropomorphized and that illustrates or leads to a particular moral lesson. A moral which may at the end be added explicitly as a concise maxim or saying. A fable differs from a parable in that the latter excludes animals, plants, inanimate objects, and forces of nature as actors that assume speech or other powers of humankind. Conversely, an animal tale specifically includes talking animals as characters. Interludes. The interludes were dramatic scenes which were often presented at banquets and entertainment parties where a little fun was wanted. But later on, they were introduced into a miracle play to to enrapture the audience after a serious scene. The quarrel between Noah and his hero's wife is considered a tale, a late addition in the tradition of interlude. The interludes originated undoubtedly out of a motive to supply humor, and John Haywood, 1497 to 1580, a jester at the court of Mary, is given the credit of raising the interlude to the distinct dramatic form now known as comedy. Haywood's interludes were written between 1520 to 1540, and his most famous work is the four-piece containing the characters of a pardon, containing the characters of a pardoner, a plumber, a peddler, and a apothecary. Another interesting interlude of Haywood is the play of the weather. All these yearly plays, the mysteries, the miracles, and the moralities were written mostly in prose, mingled with raised usual and have no serious contribution to English literature. They, however, serve a purpose which is to train actors to keep alive the dramatic spirit and prepare the soil for rich dramatic activity in the Elizabethan age that follows. Soliloquy. Soliloquy. A soliloquy is a monologue addressed to oneself and audience, with thoughts spoken out loud without addressing another character. When two or more characters in a play are talking to each other, it's called dialogue. When one character is talking for a while, it's called a monologue. Soliloquy is the word we traditionally use to refer to a monologue that is delivered when the character is alone. In Shakespeare's plays, for example, there are many speeches that begin with a character saying something like, "Now I am alone," and you know you are about to experience a soliloquy. Soliloquies tend to have the effect of making you feel like you are getting access to the character's true inner state. We assume they are being honest because they are talking to themselves. At the beginning of Shakespeare's Richard III, for example, Richard is delivering a soliloquy, and when he notices that someone is coming, he says, "Type thoughts down to my soul." The implication is that playgoers have heard things he does not actually want everyone to know. Many people find that the intimacy created during a soliloquy makes it easy to emphasize with the speaker or can even make us complicit in whatever scheme the character has been plotting out loud. But sometimes that intimacy is itself a performance. For instance, in a later soliloquy in that same scene of Richard III, Richard says he plans to marry Lady Annie not because he loves her, but for another secret close intent, basically for private reasons. At that moment, playgoers are hearing more than the other characters, but we are not getting totally direct access. Richard is still keeping some things to himself. Justice. Justice is the quality of being just or fair. Superheroes fight for justice because they want everything to be fair and not let bad guys win. Just ask Wonder Woman, Superman, or any other member of the Justice League. Justice is usually associated with the law. A judge is also known as a justice, and the point of the law is to keep everything in a society fair according to society's rules. Justice, capital J, is also the structure of a blindfolded woman holding scales and a sword. If something is brought to justice, the good guys have been rewarded and the bad guys punished. The scales are even. Parable. A parable is a succinct, didactic story in prose or verse that illustrates one or more instructive lessons or principles. It differs from a fable in that fables employ animals, plants, inanimate objects, or forces of nature as characters, whereas parables have human characters. A parable is a type of metaphorical analogy. Some scholars of the canonical Gospels and the New Testament apply the term parable only to the parables of Jesus, although there is not a common restriction of that term. Parables such as the parable of the prodigal son are important to Jesus' teaching method. Dear viewers, literary terms গুলো একটু hard. That's why you have to practice, you have to revise again and again so that you can understand it easily. Thank you very much for watching this video. All the best. Assalamu alaikum.